Okay, good morning everyone. Boker tov. So we will start today and we'll continue with Hashem next week, talking about the vidui, the confession, but from the halachic perspective and from the hashkafic perspective. We will start with the halacha, and then we will see how the hashkafah fits in as well and enriches the idea of the halachic perspective in the vidui. So first and foremost, let's talk about the time for confession. Halachically. So the Gemara in Yomayin, the Babylonian Talmud Masechet Yomayin, Daf Pei Zayin Amud Bet, says the following: Tanu Rabbanan. So our rabbis taught us, mitzvat vidui erev Yom HaKippurim im chashecha. So the mitzvah of confession is to do it on erev Yom HaKippurim im chashecha. What does it mean im chashecha? When it's become dark. Now we know that we have sunrise, zricha, we have shkia, sunset. We have bein hashmashot, twilight, and then we have night. What is im chashecha? It's like a very ambivalent term. Is that like before? Is that in between? Is that a little after? What does it mean im chashecha? Because if you tell me, like, what are the options? If I say that this is really nighttime, so this is part of Ma'ariv. Right? We know in Ma'ariv you make a confession, right? If you say before, like before, it's mincha time. Mincha time, we also erev Yom Kippur. We say vidui. So when exactly are we talking about? Aval amru chachamim, but the rabbis taught us, יתוודה קודם שיוכל וישתה, שמא תטרף דעתו בסעודה. So the rabbis taught us that what? That you should make the confession before chashecha, before the night, let's say. You should do it before you eat and drink, which means probably mincha time already. Why? Because maybe you will get tzehitz or a little meshigane during the meal, and you will not be able to make a proper confession. And even though you made the confession before you ate and drank, מתוודה לאחר שיאכל וישתה. You need to make another confession after you ate. Why? שמא ירא דבר כלכלה בסעודה. Maybe you spoke a little bit לשון הרע during the סעודה, or something, so you need to make another confession, so you will do another one. ואף על פי שהתוודה ערבית, even though you made a confession during מעריב, יתוודה שחרית, שחרית יתוודה במוסף, מוסף יתוודה במנחה, מנחה יתוודה בנעילה. So how many times we make a confession? ערבית, שחרית, מנחה, מוסף, מנחה, נעילה, 5 times. And then we have one before the meal. And then we have one after the meal. But when is that exactly, this one after the meal? What are we talking about? And then, יחיד אחר תפילתו, היכן אמרו, when do you say the confession? So the individual say it after he finished שעה 18, ושליח ציבור אמרו באמצע. ושליח ציבור says it in the middle of the recitation of 18, like what we do today. So basically what we have here is a very interesting thing, is that we basically have what I will call a 5-time confession which is mandatory. ערבית, שחרית, Musaf, Mincha, Neila. Then we have one which is rabbinic in origin before the meal. And then we have another one, rabbinic in origin, after the meal. And it's called Im Chashecha, equal to Achrei Achilato V'Shtiyato. You're with me? After you ate and drank, you need to make a confession, but it's also called Im Chashecha. So what exactly are we talking about, and why is that important? I will tell you in a minute. Says Rashi, what does it mean im chashecha? לאחר אכילה משקיבל עליו יום הכיפורים. So let's say you have your סעודה מפסקת, I don't know, let's say Yom Kippur is at 6 o'clock. Okay, you finish סעודה מפסקת at 5:45, 5:50, you brush your teeth, okay, everyone does whatever they need to do, and at 1 to 6, you accept upon yourself all the isurim, all the prohibitions of Yom Kippur, and then you need to make a confession. Yes? What does it mean, Mishekibel alav Yom Kippur? So I can create that one option is what I told you before. Or, after you accepted upon yourself Yom Kippur, it means what? After you say, for example, Shecheyanu v'kiyimanu v'gyanu lazman hazeh, which is after what? After Kol Nidrei, and then you go into what? The rabbi speech. And then Neila, and then Tfilat Arvit. Right, so it's really after you already about to start Tfilat Arvit. So Rashi is pretty ambiguous, מי שקיבל עליו יום הכיפורים, but the Ramban, Nachmanides, has something which is very, very clear, and he says the following. הדתנן מצוות וידוי ערב יום הכיפורים עם חשיכה, what we said in the Breita, that the confession, the mitzvah to confess on ערב יום כיפור is עם חשיכה, אבל אמרו חכמים מתוודה קודם שיאכל וישתה שמא תתערב בדעתו בסעודה, ואף על פי שהתוודה קודם שיאכל וישתה, מתוודה לאחר שיאכל וישתה. So the Ramban quotes what the Gemara says, that what? That חכמים says that you need to make a confession before you eat, and after you ate. נראה לפי דקדוק הלשון הזה, it seems to be that if you are very meticulous about this language, שאין הווידוי שהוא מתוודה לאחר אכילה בתפילת ערבית. It says when we say עם חשיכה, we do not refer to the confession that you say during מעריב. מדלא קטני, ואף על פי שהתוודה קודם שיאכל וישתה, מתוודה ערבית, וקטני ואף על פי שהתוודה ערבית. So first and foremost, the Ramban says, when it says im chashicha, it does not mean arvit. Why? Because the Breita knows how to say arvit. How do we know it? The Breita says, אף על פי שהתוודה ערבית, מתוודה שחרית. אף על פי שהתוודה שחרית, מתוודה מוסף. So we know how to say arvit. So therefore, im chashicha, which means after the meal, probably refers to what? To a different time that we need to make a confession. ועוד, הדקטני מצוות וידוי ערב יום הכיפורים הוא עם חשיכה, when it says that the mitzvah of vidui, of confession is עם חשיכה, דהיינו לאחר שיאכל וישתה, אלא שהקדימו לו חכמים להתוודות קודם שיאכל משום שמא תתערב דעתו בסעודה, ועליה כאמר שאף על פי שהצריכו לו להקדים ולהתוודות, עיקר הוידוי לא הפסיד את מקומו וצריך להתוודות לאחר שאכל ושתה, דהיינו עם חשיכה. So says the Ramban, really the original thought was what? That you need to confess before Hashkafah. However, the rabbis were concerned that what? That you will eat and your mind will be somewhere else and you will not be able to make a confession. Therefore, the rabbi says, okay, you know what? Let's do another confession. When? Before the meal. But the one after the meal still what? Still exists. Don't move it, don't change it, don't move it to Ma'ariv. So what kind of a confession the Ramban is talking about? We'll talk about that in a minute. יותר נכון, 2. ואילו ערבית לא מקרי לאחר שאכל ושתה, דלאו סמוך לאכילי, ותפילת ערבית שמע עלה. And also, אם חשיכה is not ערבית. It's two different times. ועוד, מהי אף על פי, וכי תעלה על דעתך שלא יתוודה ביום הכיפורים עצמו, ואין וידוי ערבית, אלא משום שמא ירד דבר כלכלה של עבירה בסעודה, וענן מצוות וידוי של ערב יום הכיפורים כאמרינן, דהוא עם חשיכה. אבל של יום הכיפורים ודאי בעיצומו של יום הוא. So the Ramban brings another proof for his claim. He says, everyone understands that you need to make a confession starting Yom Kippur. This is the entire idea, at least according to the Rambam. The mitzvah is what? It's not even tshuva. It's what? It's mitzvah she'yitvadeh. That you make a confession. That's based on the Torah. And that starts when Yom Kippur starts. When Yom Kippur starts? Ma'ariv. So that's for sure you need to make a confession. Therefore, says the Ramban, I need to say that the confession that we are talking about here is not the one in Ma'ariv. So what confession are you talking about? Wait. Ela mashma deha chiktani. I'm in the fourth line before the end of this paragraph. Ela mashma deha chiktani. But rather the interpretation of this Breita should be as follows. מצוות וידוי של ערב יום הכיפורים שצריך להתוודות, the confession that you need to say on ערב יום כיפור, כדי שייכנס ליום בתשובה, הוא עם חשיכה סמוך ליום עצמו. So first and foremost, some women will not say שהחיינו, you will say שהחיינו when you hear it in shul, here. And if you said, that's a different question. But
no, I mean in terms of
right, but still, it's mamish before kol nidrei, right?
Yeah.
So still,
But the question is, should they say vidui then?
you should say vidui before that.
Said that one will do the vidui,
Uh-huh.
issue makabel, alav etachah.
Right.
So I'm asking is women who, when they do halakha say shehayanu, does it then apply to them that it's okay to say vidui then, or do they also wait?
So, It depends what vidui. I know I'm not answering your question directly because it depends on Rashi and Ramban. So we'll see that in a few minutes. שלא יהיה שהות לחטוא בין הווידוי והיום. So says the Ramban, we need to make a confession, like really close to what? To the acceptance of Yom Kippur, so you will not have time to sin between the last confession of Erev Yom Kippur and Yom Kippur. אבל חששו חכמים שמא תתערב דעתו בסעודה וימנע בשכרותו מן הווידוי. But the rabbis were afraid that you might even get drunk. I don't know who is drinking wine in Suda Mafseket, but that you might get drunk or your mind will not be there, so you will not be able to make the confession. לפיכך החמירו עליו להתוודות קודם אכילה. Therefore the rabbis what? Became stringent and told you you need to what? To make a confession before you eat. ואף על פי שהתוודה קודם אכילה, and even though you confessed before you ate, חוזר ומתוודה בזמנו עם חשיכה סמוך ליום עצמו, שמא אירע דבר כלכלה של עבירה בסעודה. ווידוי של ערבית הוא וידוי של יום הכיפורים עצמו. לא דוקטני דוודאי מתוודה הוא ביום הכיפורים, אלא קטני אף על פי שהתוודה ערבית מתוודה שחרית, וכל היום שמא אירע לו דבר עבירה כל היום. יום הכיפורים עם חשיכה ומכפר, זוהי שיטת הברייתא הזו הנכון. I'm going to explain. I know I read quickly. I'm going to explain. Not to translate, but to explain. The Ramban says like that. The given is you need to confess during Yom Kippurim. Yom Kippurim begins with Arvit. So the fact that you make a 5 times confession, that's obvious. Arvit, Shachrit, Musaf, Mincha, Ne'ilah. Why? So your entire day is tshuva, confession. We are talking not about Yom Kippur. What are we talking about? Erev Yom Kippur. A confession, Erev Yom Kippur. So, stage 1 was, you need to do it im chashecha. Says Ramban, this is not Arvit. We are still talking about what? Erev Yom Kippur. The rabbis were concerned. If I will tell you to do a confession at 5:45, it might be that you will not be able to make it. Why? Because after the meal that you had at 4:30, you might forget about it. Therefore, I'm going to tell you what? To make a confession when? Before you eat. Which, by the way, this is why at Mincha time, we make a confession only through our Shmona Esrei, but not at the recitation, not at the repetition. We don't do another confession, a congregational confession at Mincha, Erev Yom Kippur. So it's only you. Why? Because we are concerned that you're going to eat, drink, and forget about it, right? Okay, so therefore, we added another time for confession on Erev Yom Kippur. Now, says the Ramban, the original one that we said that you need to do it im chashecha still remains. Therefore, you needed to say it mamash im chashecha, which means almost like twilight. Before it becomes Yom Kippur, when it's still Erev Yom Kippur, this is the time for what? For another confession. But we don't have a prayer here to say a confession. We do. But rega, we're not there yet. Okay. So that's the understanding of the Braita according to the Ramban. עכשיו, ומה שמסייעני עוד סיוע ברור, he says, I have another proof to substantiate my opinion that there is another confession, ממש still בערב Yom Kippur, minutes before Yom Kippur. So in order to what? To make sure that you come with a clean page. Okay? You don't have time to sin. He's very optimistic.
Are you repeating the confession each time?
Yeah. Same thing. Arvit, Shachrit, Musaf, Mincha, Ne'ilah, it's the same confession. I mean, you can mention variety of sins. Not you. We have a list. But basically,
Exactly.
yes. But you do the same confession. But we'll talk about it in a second. I know, there is a lot, but wait. עוד סיוע ברור שמצאתי בתוספתא. I found another Tanaic source in the תוספתא, דקטנית, that it says in the תוספתא, מצוות וידוי ערב יום הכיפורים, the confession of יום הכיפורים, ערב יום הכיפורים, is עם חשיכה, אבל אמרו חכמים, מתוודה אדם קודם שיאכל וישתה, שמא תתערב דעתו בתוך אכילה ושתייה, ואף על פי שהתוודה קודם שיאכל וישתה, even though you made the confession before you ate, צריך שיתוודה לאחר אכילה, you need to make a confession after you ate, שמא אירע דבר כלכלה בסעודה, ואף על פי שהתוודה לאחר שאכל ושתה, and even though he made a confession after he ate, צריך שיתוודה ערבית. This is a wonderful proof from the Tosefta. There it says clearly, there is im chashecha and there is what? Arvit. So they are definitely not the same.
Can you sit in between?
You can try. See how it works. הרי זה מפורש, אלא שבעלי הגמרא לא שנו בברייתא שהביאו בגמרא. So he says this is a Tosefta, but sometimes when you copy the Tosefta, the בעלי הגמרא didn't copy it properly. So, אבל כולם לדבר אחד נתכוונו, שמתוודה קודם אכילה ומתוודה אחר אכילה, סמוך לחשיכה, ומתוודה ערבית וכל היום. ורש"י ז"ל מפרש עם חשיכה ערבית משקידש היום. רש"י, at least according to the Ramban, understands that when it says עם חשיכה, it means what? ערבית, ממש ערבית. And he says, ואינו כן בשום מקום. Because I didn't find it anywhere. וכן הראשונם כולם לא כתבו זה שבחיבוריהם שהתוודה 2 פעמים בערב יום הכיפורים. No one says that you need to make 2 confessions on ערבית. There is only 1 confession. ולא דקדקו בברייתא הזאת, ומה שכתבנו האמת והנכון והישר. So the Ramban basically claims what? There is another confession before יום הכיפורים begins. Now, let's think about it. Where do we say a confession before יום הכיפורים begins? יפה. תפילה זכה. I don't know how many of you know what I'm talking about. תפילה זכה, okay? תפילה זכה, או וידוי דרבנו ניסים, there are 2, but many people remember the תפילה זכה. It's a תפילה that you sit, it's like 3 pages long, and you go through not the וידוי that we say during ערבית, שחרית, מוסף, מנחה, נעילה. It's not על חטא. You sit and you start talking to Hashem. Mamash, it's a beautiful thing. Sometimes you don't have too much time to say it because you come late. Not you, me. And the idea is that you basically confess about all the sins and you describe them. Your eyes, the sense of touching, the sense of hearing, the sense of watching, the sense of tasting. And it goes one by one and gives examples. And then you ask Hashem for forgiveness. And in Vidui the Rabbeinu Nisim is a bit different, but also along the same lines. Which means, and this is an interesting thing, there is a dispute to say Tfilah Zakah or not. According to the Ramban, when you say Tfilah Zakah, you are basically fulfilling what? The mitzvah of Vidui im Chashecha. The mitzvah to make a confession im Chashecha before Yom Kippur begins. Now, what is the significance of it? First and foremost, we know that Erev Yom Kippur is a Yom Tov. How do we know that? Give me examples. No Tachanun. Okay? A. B. Seudah. A meal. Yeah, we have a meal. It sounds almost like Erev Pesach. Erev Pesach is also some kind of a Yom Tov. What's the third one? A third element that Erev Yom Kippur is Mamash Yom Tov. That Mamash Yom Tov that you cannot drive, but I'm saying like an element of Yom Tov. You what?
You say Yom Tov when you speak.
Right, but there is Adlakat Nerot, but that's to say like Mamash before Yom Tov.
Well, I can't remember, but if Yom Kippur falls on Shabbos, Erev Yom Kippur would be on Friday, and the Shabbos, the Motzei Shabbos before, would you say V'hi Noam, like we don't say for when Erev Pesach falls on a Friday, because
there is Isur Melacha.
Right.
יפה. Erev Pesach, in Perek Shlishim Pesachim, we have Makom Shenagu, and many people don't do Melacha on Erev Pesach. And don't do Melacha also sometimes on Erev Yom Kippur. Why? Because you need to prepare yourself. You have many things to do. Okay? Between Tshuva, Mikveh, and all sorts, and preparing the meal, you have things to do. So it's become an Erev, it's become almost like a Yom Tov. And especially, we always celebrate Yom Tov with eating and drinking. We can't do it on the Yom Tov itself on Yom Kippur because it's a day of Inui. Therefore, you do it the day, a few hours before, which is Erev Yom Kippur. So Erev Yom Kippur in Halacha, and also by the way in Hashkafah, in Agadot, Erev Yom Kippur is always a day of transformation. Of transformation, getting into the Yom Tov. So it has elements of what? Of Yom Tov. Says the Ramban, I want to make sure. Oh, one more thing. The language of the Torah describing the inui, the affliction of Yom Kippur, is what? בתשיעי לחודש בערב, מערב עד ערב, תשבתו שבתכם. Which means what? On the 9th from the evening, and then from night to night, you will keep Yom Kippur. So what does it mean בערב? So you have, for example, Rabbi Akiva that says what? כל האוכל בתשיעי, כאילו התענה תשיעי ועשירי. Everyone who eats on the 9th, it's like you fasted for the 9th and the 10th. So the 9th of Tishrei, which is Erev Yom Kippur, has a tremendous significance of almost like a Yom Tov. Says the Ramban, look what the rabbis did. Mincha time, which is also always like the midday, so you already start to make what? A confession before the meal, because maybe in the meal you will get whatever. Then you have the meal, and then after the meal you don't really have too much time before the meal and Yom Kippur. So what do? You bring in another confession, which is the Tfilah Zakah. Okay, there's no special confession. The Ramban did not write another confession. There is a Tfilah Zakah, or you make a confession that you can say by yourself, that without the language itself, like just Chatati Aviti Pashanti. So you go into Yom Kippur fully, quote unquote, pure. You don't have time to sin. You made immediately another confession, and then you start what? Kol Nidrei. Kol Nidrei and Arvit, obviously. I'm talking about Arvit. Kol Nidrei, I don't want to burst anyone's bubbles here, but Kol Nidrei is a little bit of a later addition, and when to say it, before Shkia, after Shkia, that's a different question. Yes?
Who wrote the
Tfilah Zakah?
yeah, and when?
No idea for both questions. Yeah. I mean, I can come up with speculations.
If that's an answer to what's raised in the Gemara.
Yeah. I can come up with many speculations. I don't think that, I can tell you one thing for sure, Tfilah Zakah was not composed in the time of the Gemara. That's for sure. Not from the language and not from the concepts. It was something later on. Now, it might be that the Ramban did not even know about the Tfilah Zakah, but he spoke about some kind of a confession. So now, as you see, we have a halachic debate here. Do we have another obligation for a confession at the moments of what? Of the end of Erev Yom Kippur, getting into Yom Kippur, which is a halachic debate. But from this halachic debate, what do we derive? We derive conclusions regarding what? The definition of Erev Yom Kippur, and B, the preparation for Yom Kippur. That's Ramban and versus Rashi, according to the Ramban. I don't think that's what Rashi says. Rashi did not say that in the Rashi that we have in front of us. Okay. Says the Rambam in Hilchot Tshuva, Yom HaKippurim הוא זמן תשובה לכל. Yom HaKippurim is the time for repentance for everyone. ליחיד ולרבים, for the individuals, for the masses. והוא קץ מחילה וסליחה לישראל. And this is the time for what? For atonement and forgiveness for the entire Jewish people. Why? Because that was the day, according to Tanakh, that Hashem says what? Salachti. That's after Chet HaEgel. Hashem, Moshe goes up and down, Yom Kippur, Hashem says to him what? Salachti, and gives him the Luchot Shniyim. לפיכך, therefore, חייבים הכל לעשות תשובה. So everyone is obligated to do תשובה. ולהתוודות ביום הכיפורים. And to confess on Yom Kippur. ומצוות וידוי יום הכיפורים, and the mitzvah to confess on Yom Kippur, שיתחיל מערב היום, that he should start when? From ערב יום כיפור, קודם שיוכל שמא יחנק בסעודה שיתוודה. So you should make the confession before the meal, not during the meal. Why? You will choke. Okay? ואף על פי שיתוודה קודם שיוכל, even though he will make the confession before he eats, חוזר ומתוודה, now take a look at the Rambam, בלילי יום הכיפורים ערבית. Like the Ramban or like Rashi? יפה מאוד, simple. וחוזר ומתוודה בשחרית, במוסף, מנחה ונעילה, ואחד מתוודה יחיד אחר תפילתו ושליח ציבור באמצע תפילתו בברכה רביעית. According to the Rambam, who probably did not know the Tosefta, the Ramban brought this Tosefta, which is clearly distinguished between what? Hashkafah and Arvit. The Rambam might not see that Tosefta, or he saw that Tosefta and he ignored it. Why? Because maybe he thought that the Tosefta is meshubeshet, which means it's not clear, it's not accurate, which happens many times. So what do we have here? According to the Rambam, there is no other commandment to make a confession after you what? After you ate before Yom Kippur. Meaning there is one that we do mincha time, and then there is when the next one? Arvit. Arvit, and that's called what? Achrei sheyochal ve'ishteh. After you eat and drink. Yes?
Maybe that's why it's important to know when Tfilat Zakah was written, because if it didn't exist in those times, then that's why they decided Halacha that that's Arvit and not
Agree. I will try to come up with it. I'll be very honest with you, I have doubts when exactly that Tfilat Zakah was written, and when it was implemented in Kehilot Israel, because Faradim, for example, anyone Faradi here? Do you say Tfilat Zakah? You have no idea what I'm talking about. Yeah, you know, but you have never said it in your life. By the way, now, ready? Sit down. Do you say Netanet Tokef? What kind of a Jew are you, right? How come you don't say Netanet Tokef? Sfaradim do not say Netanet Tokef, and they are still signed and sealed for good life, Baruch Hashem.
Sfaradi Tachna is a lot longer than Ashkenazi.
And they wake up all the month to say Slichot. I understand. Yeah, that's because they don't say Netanet Tokef. So the idea is what? Is that as you can see, Tfilat Zakah, I have some doubts where exactly it was written, so I will try maybe for next week to get a little bit clearer answers. I agree. It's obviously very important for our discussion, but I try to ignore it for now. By the way, the Rambam and the Ramban, you're talking about 1 century difference. So in the time of the Ramban, Vidui Haran was a little bit after the Ramban died, but it was barely the same time. But the idea is that we have, according to the Rambam, we don't have another confession. Maspik. You said once, that was before you ate, and then one more, Arvit, which will also bring another hashkafic issue, which is, how would I like you to come to Yom Kippur? You know, when you say the confession, I'm not saying only about reciting it, but when you really concentrate on each word and everything, one of two things can happen to you. You can be very honest and, derive strength from what you say, or you can be very, very depressed. Start, reminding yourself the sins that you made, and some of them that you repeated from last year and 2 years ago and 3 years ago, and you said to Hashem that I will not do it again, and I did it again. And you can become very, very depressed. So that also relates to what? To our perspective, which I'm speaking about it Shabbat afternoon from last week, and I'm talking about it for the next 2 weeks, is how do we approach the Chagim, especially Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, as Yamim Noraim, terrifying days, or as awesome days? Awesome, great days. Those are days that I can granted atonement and forgiveness, and I'm pretty happy. So when you come to Yom Kippur and you beat yourself up again and again and again, there is some kind of a question of Rega, what's going on here? Rav Soloveitchik has a very interesting piece saying that when we say the public confession, we sing it. It's very interesting. When you are an individual, you're like a kafuf, you bend and you cry, whatever. But when you say it publicly, you celebrate it in a way, which has a very interesting thing. Yes?
It depends if you're looking forward or looking backwards.
Also true, which by the way related to another question that we're not going to discuss this year, maybe next year, is do you need to repeat a confession about sins that you did not repeat from last year? Do you still need to remember them and and mention them? I stole from you last year, I didn't do it this year, I did tshuva. Do I need to repeat that sin again, even though I didn't do it this year? So next time. Says the Shulchan Aruch. So Rabbi Yosef Karo Shulchan Aruch Orachaim Ilchot Yom Kippur says like that, צריך להתוודות במנחה, so you need to confess at מנחה time, קודם סעודה מפסקת, before the סעודה, says the רמה, יחיד אומרו, אחר שגמר תפילתו, so the individual says it after he finished his תפילה, ושץ אומרו בתוך התפילה, okay, good. Says the משנה ברורה, so we are now in the 20th century, he says, קודם סעודה מפסקת, before you eat, שמא יארע לו דבר כלכלה בסעודה, שיחנק או שתתערב דעתו ולא יוכל להתוודות. Right? So why do you need to say the confession before you eat? Because something will happen in the meal, so I'm saying to you, confess before. ויש פוסקים שסוברים שצריך להתוודות גם אחר אכילה קודם חשיכה, וראוי להחמיר כדעה זו. It says, there are opinions that says that you need to make another confession after you ate, and you should be מחמיר, like this opinion, וכן נהגו בזמננו, and that's the practice in our times, שאומרים אז תפילה זכה. Now, I will just say that despite our question of when exactly tefillah zakah was composed in terms of time and place, we can say that even according to the Ramban, let's say if tefillah zakah was not in his time, still you can create a confession, right? We just do tefillah zakah, but you can create another confession, which means in principle the Ramban and this opinion says you need to say another confession before you begin your Yom Kippur service. Okay. תוספות, תוספת יום הכיפורים, מסכת יומא. So that's Rabbi Moshe Rabbi Shlomo ibn Habib. So he says the following. I'm in the third line. והעולם לא נהגו כהרמב"ן. Says the common practice on page 3. The common practice is not to do like the Ramban, which means you don't make another confession after you ate. אמנם פה ירושלים, however here in ירושלים תיבנה ותיכונן במהרה בימינו, נוהגים שקודם שהתפללו ערבית, אומרים כל הקהל, ביקשתי לך אל תשוקתי, שיש בה וידוי לצאת ידי חובת הרמב"ן. In ירושלים, they accept what the Ramban says, and they created a piyut, this is Faradim. And there is no tefillah zakah, but they created another piyut that says what? ביקשתי לך אל תשוקתי. I requested you, my God, that I have desires to have a connection with you, or something like that. Okay, so why, I'm going to skip it, that's not really, it's not my main point, but my main point is what? That this opinion of the Ramban is like hovering around. In the 17th century, you see what? That most places don't say shum tachanun, shum vidui, sorry, after you ate. However, in Yerushalayim, they do. And the Mishnah Berurah in the 20th century, where in Radin, in Poland, he says what? The common practice is to say, at least Ashkenazim, to say Tfilah Zakah in order to fulfill the Ramban's opinion. So now it's not only in Yerushalayim, it went to where? To Poland. And you can understand and assume that if the Chafetz Chaim says it's in Radin, it probably was all over Poland. So the idea is something very interesting. The Ramban was the only opinion in the 13th century regarding his understanding of another confession after you eat. And I don't care if it's Tfilah Zakah or some kind of a confession. No one paid attention to him too much. The Rambam before him obviously did not pass in like that. Rashi is not, and all the other Rishonim. And then in the 17th century, somehow it comes into Yerushalayim. And in the 20th century, probably all Ashkenaz is saying what? Tfilah Zakah. And obviously it brings the question of...
It was accepted in Morocco and Algeria.
Oh yeah, sure. But that's the Sephardi.
Yeah.
So the Sephardim in the 17th century is starting to adapt what? The Ramban. And the Ashkenazim are adopting him when? Definitely it was probably before the 20th century, but the first evidence we have is the 20th century by the Shla. No, it was even before 17th century by the Shla. And then Mishnah Berurah brings it in the 20th century, saying that all Poland is probably, when he says Bimkomotenu, it's all Ashkenaz that he knows, that they are saying this Tfilah Zakah. Which means, this is a fascinating thing all the time when you see the centuries. You see what? You see that Erev Yom Kippur, not only Yom Kippur, but Erev Yom Kippur also changed or evolved during the centuries. If you don't make a psak like the Ramban, think about it. You make a confession during Mincha time, right? Mincha is at 1:20. Think about it. Think about the day. I will describe to you the day according to the Ramban, and I will describe you today according non-Ramban. Non-Ramban. 1:20 Mincha. Finish by 2. You have Sudam of Seket at 4:30. You finish at 5:45. You go to Shul. You do Kol Nidrei. You make Arvit, and only then you start the confession, right? The first time of confession, like the mitzvah of Yom Kippur. That's the non-Ramban. So basically, after you finish the meal until Arvit, not only that you have a lot of time to what? To sin. So you'll have something to confess on Arvit, but also the preparation of the Erev Yom Kippur. And the Yom Kippur, there is a break, right? There is mamash a break. Ramban's description of the day is 1:20 Mincha, finished by 2, 4:30 Sudam of Seket, 10 to 6 you are done, you go to Shul, and you say, or you, even at home, you start saying, you don't need to come to Shul to say Tfilah Zakah, you start with Tfilah Zakah. And as I said to you, Tfilah Zakah is a very private confession, really. It's if you never saw that in your life, take a look. I think it's interesting. So you put yourself already in that atmosphere of what? Of tshuva, and then you start what? Kol Nidrei, Arvit, and the confession. Obviously, there is a connection between Erev Yom Kippur to what? To Yom Kippur. And you start accepting this atmosphere of Yom Kippur already when? Im Chashecha. So this is, I'm not saying two totally different Erev Yom Kippur, but it's definitely a different Erev Yom Kippur according to the Ramban and according to the non-Ramban opinions. Okay.
That's
So-
according to social circumstances. Different societies have different eating habits and recitations of a list of sins that if you read them all carefully, it gives you a good idea if you're a gangster offense you hadn't thought of.
Again.
When you have a list of sins,
Uh-huh.
you ask for chotosi,
Mm-hmm.
some of the things you haven't done.
Right, but someone did.
What we're doing for B'nai Israel.
Right, we are doing that in for everyone. So because we have arvut,
But isn't it a personal thing also?
so when you say your own confession, then you can mention only things that you did. But when you are with the public and you say gazalti and I didn't, I'm sure there is one Jew who did. At least
Somebody
one.
did all this.
Yeah. So therefore, I'm doing it with him.
Okay, that's the communal.
Yeah, that's the commune. Yeah.
The real essence of being Kippur is your personal.
Both.
Huh?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah. You can't achieve atonement unless you are part of Am Yisrael.
That's both.
Yeah.
Not connected with what you were saying, but when does Birchat Banim, when did that start?
Oh, that's probably late. This is just a nice thing to do. Yeah.
But
It's just fun.
it's not a halacha. It's
No. But people obviously approach it almost like halacha. Yeah. I mean, it's a beautiful thing to do, obviously.
But you have to have time.
Yeah. Plan ahead. Yes.
If I understand the timeline that you presented correctly, there was considerable amount of time, centuries perhaps, where Tfilat Zakah was not said, right? And all of a sudden, the Chafetz Chaim comes out with this. Was there something that triggered this?
Sure. But you will need to wait for next week. Sorry. Okay. So now we spoke about the time of the vidui and we saw two opinions. Now let's talk about the essence of the confessions. Okay. So first and foremost, the Gemara says in Yoma in Daf Pei Zayin Amud Bet, that's in the middle of page 3, Mai Amar. What's the content of the confession? Amar Rav. So Rav and Amora, who was in Eretz Israel, was a student of Rabbi and then moved to Bavel. Amar Rav, Ata Yodea Razei Olam. You know all the secrets of the world. Ushmuel Amar, his colleague, Mima'amakei alev kraticha. Okay, so from the depths of the heart I called out to you. Velevi Amar, he was another colleague, ובתורתך כתוב לאמור. רבי יוחנן אמר ריבון העולמים, רבי יהודה אומר כי עוונותינו רבו מלמנות וחטאותינו עצמו מספר. So now we have a variety of opinions. A variety of opinions until we will get to what we say today. Rabbi Yehuda says, oh, because our tremendous sins, there are so many of them, we can't count them anymore, but you can. Rav Amnun אמר אלוקיי עד שלא נוצרתי איני כדאי. Before I was born, I was not worthy to be born, ועכשיו שנוצרתי, now when I was born, כאילו לא נוצרתי, עפר אני בחיי, קל וחומר במיתתי. So I'm dust and ashes, I'm nothing. So הרי אני לפניך ככלי מלא בושה וכלימה. I'm here empty-handed. יהי רצון מלפניך שלא יחטא. I wish that I will never commit a sin anymore. ומה שחטאתי, in everything that I committed already, sins that I committed, מרוג ברחמך, please atone from them and erase them, אבל לא על ידי ייסורים, but please not do it through suffering. והיינו וידויה דרבה כולה שתה. And that's what Rava would make the confession the entire year. ודרב אמנון הזוטה ביום הדכיפורי. And what Rav Amnun Azuta says he will do on Yom Kippur. אמר מר זוטרא, לא אמרן אלא דלא אמר, אבל אנחנו חטאנו. אבל אמר, אנחנו חטאנו, to לא צריך. If you say, אנחנו חטאנו, that's the main idea of confession. We sinned. ואמר בר עמדודי, הווה קין מן הקמא דשמואל, והווה יתיב, I was in front of Shmuel, and he was sitting, וכמעט השליחה דציבורא ואמר, אבל אנחנו חטאנו, and he heard, the שליח ציבור says, אנחנו חטאנו, come may come, he stood up, to show that what? That this is the essence of the confession. אמר שמע מינה, עיקר וידוי, I who. Which means, the main essence of וידוי is, אנחנו חטאנו. Now, why is that the main essence of וידוי? Pretty obvious. That's admission of guilt. Yeah, if that's the shots, right? If that's the shliach tzibur, or even individually. Now, how do we learn it? Who says chatati? David HaMelech. King David, when he was rebuked by Natan HaNavi regarding Bathsheba, and he basically says what? Chatati. And when he says chatati, the Navi says to him, Hashem says, Chatatcha techupar. You will be atoned. You're going to get punished. Does not mean being atoned does not mean that you're going to be exempt from everything, but not as severely as before. So now we see that the essence of the vidui is anachnu chatanu, and that's when you also need to stand up. We stand up for everything, but anachnu chatanu, that's like the beginning. So that's the main essence of vidui. Now,
Question. Chatati is personal. The idea that the personal confession is a real thing. I'm looking at it from a psychological way. Chatanu, well, I didn't do all those things, but I'm a member of the society that did all these things.
Yeah.
That's why you said they're both there.
right? Nachon. And also when you look, chatati, aviti, pashati, and then there is aval anachnu chatanu. So you have the plural and you have the individual.
I'm part of a lousy world.
No, you are a part of a great nation that from time to time fails. Different perspective.
I'm a lawyer. That's the
Now, I do bring the question here. Do you need to detail the sins, or just to say them in general way? And also, do you need to repeat sins that you did in the past? Okay, now take a look at this one. This one is an interesting thing. The Gemara in Yomai Daf Pei Vav says the following. Tanu Rabbanan, our rabbis taught us in a Braita. עבירות שהתוודע עליהם יום הכיפורים זה לא יתוודע עליהם יום הכיפורים אחר. Sins that you confessed about them on Yom Kippur last year, don't confess about them again this year. ואם שנה בהם, but if you did them again, צריך להתוודות יום כיפור אחר. So you need to say them again, then following יום כיפור. ואם לא שנה בהן, and if you didn't do them again, וחזר והתוודע עליהן, but you still repeated them, עליו הכתוב אומר, ככלב שב על קיאו, כסיל שונה באיוולתו. So, if you committed sins last year, and you didn't do them this year, you don't need to repeat them. If you committed them again, you obviously need to confess. if you didn't commit the same sins this year, and you mention them in that confession, terrible. It's like kekelev shav al ki'o, which means when a dog goes back to whatever he spit out. Okay? Which means, why are you mentioning things that you didn't do? You didn't do it again. Just stop. Don't mention them. It's a terrible thing to do.
Maybe you didn't get atonement the last time.
Do you know of anywhere in the Talmud that they will say something and they're not going to debate it? So wait. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov אומר, כל שכן שהוא משובח. Obviously this guy should be praised. Even though he didn't do it, he still confessed it. Why? שנאמר כי פשעי אני אדע וחטאתי נגדי תמיד. My sins are in front of my eyes always. So even though I confessed about them and I didn't do them, first today I can see them in a different light. I can see the other ramifications of my sin and see, I don't know if God really forgave me or not. Maybe he didn't. So I am, just in case, I'm saying that again. Also, by saying them, I remind myself not to do it again. So now we have a debate, which is also psychological debate. Do I need to remind myself past sins even though I didn't do them?
But who knows
But you
if you're
forgot.
going to do them again?
No, let's say I'm taking notes. I didn't do them. Do what?
I said, but who knows if you're going to do them again?
Settle. When I do them again, I'll make a confession the following year.
But you have to remember what you did in the
that's
past.
right.
No, but I'm saying, this year I didn't steal. And I wrote every day. Today I didn't steal, tomorrow I didn't steal. Or until I didn't steal. So do I need to say, because last year I stole, okay, should I say it again? And the answer is, there is a debate. And we can understand both sides. On one hand, and this is, by the way, now we are going to the core of Yom Kippur and the core of Tshuva, and the psychological background for it, which is, I want you to succeed in Tshuva. Right? Everyone agreed that what? That we want to encourage you to do Tshuva. The problem with Tshuva is the first stage and the third stage. The first stage is recognizing the sin. To recognize the sin, you need to be a courageous person. Because we like to do what? To sugarcoat it. We didn't exactly sin. We didn't really kill him. Okay? We just helped him to go to another world. Right? He always wanted it. So, that's obviously an extreme case. But we try to somehow justify it, because when you really recognize that what you do is wrong, it's painful. It's an experience of failure. It's an experience of failure. So then you can go and be depressed. And then there is no second stage and there is no third stage. You are stuck with the depression. Take an example from a non-tshuva thing. Okay? You want to, to go on a diet. Okay? And the first day, you failed. Your dietitian told you, don't touch this chocolate cake, and not only that you touched it, you didn't leave anything on the plate. Okay? So now go ahead and recognize it the second day. Say, I ate it, I touched it. Like etz hadat tov hara, right? I touched it, and I ate from it, and I really enjoyed it. Okay? I failed, totally failed. So what in lieu of it, what do you say if you want to justify? Say, yeah, I did eat it, but I didn't want to throw it to the garbage. You know how many people are starving in Africa? And how come? And also, I didn't want to insult the baker, right? He put it on the plate, and obviously I'm not going to insult him. And also, I had only 99 brachot that day, and that was my 100th bracha, which I obviously completed another mitzvah. So basically, I did a mitzvah. I didn't do anything wrong, right? So we try to play with our mind. Our mind is very creative. The same thing with tshuva. However, if you don't recognize the sin, there is no hope for full tshuva. And then if there's no hope for, the easiest thing to do is to accept upon myself that I'm not going to do it again. Yeah, until
There's nothing left on the plate.
Exactly. But then when you need to confess, why confession is such an important mitzvah? Because you verbalize it. You take it from your thought process into verbalization. You verbalize it, you say it. We know with it in AA meetings and all of that, you need to what? To say it. My name is so-and-so, and I am an addict. that's how they start meetings. So therefore, why? Because you need to recognize it. You need to say it out loud. Here we have a very interesting thing. So I didn't commit a sin, but I need a little reminder. I did it once. I didn't do it this year, Baruch Hashem. But who said that I'm not going to do it next year? I need to remind myself that I constantly think and remember about my behavior. Or say, why do you need to remember that? It doesn't bring you to a good place. Exactly the opposite. Don't say it. Compare notes between this year and last year, and you say, okay, you know what? This year I did only 49 sins. Last year I did 53. So I'm pretty good. So that's the debate between Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov and Tanakama. Now it continues. Yeah.
Isn't there a psychological difference for the treatment of different kinds of sins? You can't verbalize all sins at the beginning. But somebody says, I did these things, boy, it was good, but I'll never do it again.
But that's a different thing. I'm talking about mentioning a sin that I did not do this year, but I did last year.
Yes.
So the question there is, can you say it? Can you mention it, or you shouldn't? Not only that you shouldn't, it might be even that you must not.
Yeah.
That's the debate.
But some, you should.
No, there is no sum. According to these two opinions, yes, either or. You can mention all of the things that you did 5 years ago and you didn't do it since, or you can say even one.
But that's my point.
Two different opinions.
No, but both are true. Certain sins you should remember.
These were the opinions.
Careful,
That, Phil, it might be. I might agree with you with that opinion, and we can add it if you want.
Okay.
But it's not here. I agree. I agree. You have in mind. I can hear a distinction between it depends, but the Gemara did not recognize that. The Gemara says either or.
Okay, so should I write a sefer?
בבקשה. אלא מה אני מקיים ככלב שב על קיאו? כדרבונה. דאמר רבונה כיוון שאדם עבר עבירה ושנה בה, הותרה לו. So now the Gemara says, so what does it mean? So the opinion that says that you should not mention, that you should mention the sins that you did 2 years ago, even though you didn't do it last year. So how would they explain ככלב שב על קיאו, which means like a dog that comes back to whatever he didn't eat? He says that if someone committed a sin and he did it again, it's become what? Like muteret. Like it's okay to do.
Becomes habitual.
When you do a avera and then you do it again and again and again, after the third time you don't feel that you do what? That you do an avera. But the Gemara says, רגע, הותרה לו סל כדעתך? אלא אימה נעשית לו כהיתר. So basically, he explains it that what? That it's not about that you are not allowed to mention sins that you did in the past, even though you didn't do them again, but rather you need to be careful that when you commit a sin, if you repeat it too many times, you will not think that you are doing something wrong. Okay. Yes?
So the Kohen Gadol doesn't wear his gold because we don't want to remember the cases. We don't want to give ammunition to the prosecutor that he did something years ago and he cast it over on. So don't we want to avoid?
Good question. The question is, I don't know if everyone heard, we know from the Kohen Gadol, for example, he does not wear gold, only white. Why? Because we don't want to mention Chet HaEgel, right? Good, wonderful. The only problem with that, so yes, there is an element that ein kategor na'asa sanegor, meaning the prosecutor cannot be the defendant. However, we do have two he-goats, right? One la'azazel and one la'Hashem. Why do we do it la'azazel? Look at the Ramban, okay? We do talk about some kind of categoria, okay? So we do have them both. And also we can say that sometimes the Kohen Gadol represent the entire nation and all of that. But yes, I hear the question, but we do see that we mix it a bit during Yom Kippur. Now,
And he does wear gold.
yeah, he changes, but he says in the...
But he does, but it's
Yeah.
not like it's completely.
That's what I'm saying. There is a mixture to
It's
some
not
extent.
completely eliminated.
It's not that we take all the gold from the Beit HaMikdash on Yom Kippur and say no gold. Okay. So now, okay. Okay. וצריך לפרוט את החטא. And you need to what? What is לפרוט את החטא? To specify the sin. ממש, לפרוט, כמו לפרוט פרוטות. To detail them. שנאמר, ענה חטא העם הזה חטאה גדולה ויעשו להם אלוהי זהב. דברי רבי יהודה בן בבא. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava takes from the sin of the Egel, where it says, you could say, חטא העם הזה חטאה גדולה. This nation committed a tremendous sin. זהו, stop. But the pasuk continues, ויעשו להם, and they made for themselves what? אלוהי זהב, a golden god. So therefore, you see that what? That you need to detail the sin. That's according to Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. Rabbi Akiva אומר, אשרי נשוי פשע, כסוי חטאה. Praiseworthy is the person who what? Who covers the sins. Don't detail it. Say it in general terms. Oh, okay. So, אלא מהו שאמר משה, but so how we would explain what Moshe says, ויעשו להם אלוהי זהב, כדי רבי ינאי? דאמר רבי ינאי, אמר משה לפני הקדוש ברוך הוא ריבונו של עולם, כסף וזהב שהרבית להם לישראל, עד שעמודי גרם להם שיעשו אלוהי זהב. This is unbelievable. What does it mean, ויעשו להם אלוהי זהב? That they did for themselves gods made out of gold. Moshe Rabbeinu accused God. It's because of you. You know why the Jews did a golden calf? Because of you. You gave them too much gold. Okay. We will not continue on the end of the Gemara. I just want to pose a question that we're going to continue B'ezrat Hashem next week. We ask what's the main essence of the vidui, and we answer that question. Then we had another question which obviously presented to us an interesting debate. Can you mention, should you, or maybe you are not allowed to, mention sins in your confession that you didn't do during the last year? Can you bring them up again? And the question, the psychological debate here is that will that help you or will make you more depressed? Would that make a constant reminder for what not to do? Or it's going to make a constant reminder of how much of a failure you are, which obviously we understand that it can affect your tshuva. Then the third point that we have here, which is very important, is do you need to detail the sin? Now, it's very interesting. You will see many people, they come with lists to show. And when they do, especially according to the individual confession, you see them there for what? For like an hour. You know, you finished mincha and they are still in the video for shachrit. Now, what's the idea of it? On one hand, to detail it, it brings it, it's vivid. You can really remember. If you, for example, say, על חטא שחטאתי לפניך בכיבוד הורים ומורים. Okay? Not to respect your parents and your teachers. And then you say to yourself, Rega, let me pause. You know what? I wrote to myself. On January 4th, I was disrespectful to my father, to my mother, to my rabbi, whatever. And I realized maybe I didn't even ask for forgiveness from them. And I'm saying the details. How did I do that? And you remember it, and you recreate it in your mind, so it will help you not to do it again. At the same time, if you do it for every sin that you made, and you start remembering and rejuvenating and renewing it in your mind, it can cause what? Again, the same thing, a psychological pressure on you, which will paralyze you. On the other hand, Rabbi Akiva says, Ashrei nesui pesha ksui chata, which is obviously a pasuk from Tehillim. Cover it. Just say it in general terms. אשמנו, בגדנו, גזלנו, דיברנו דופי, הבינו שלנו, אוקיי? על חטא שחטאנו לפניך, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך. Don't go into details. Why? Because it will drag you to depression. However, to say it in general terms, it's sometimes very superficial. Okay? You just say it. So, can we find some kind of a middle road? Can it be depends on different sins? Depends on different people? So those are the question of vidui. Vidui, and that is the point of this class for this week and next week. The idea of vidui is not just to say it. It's much more than that. What kind of an experience you're going to create for yourself on Yom Kippur, but not only for Yom Kippur. I'm more interested in what? In the 2 minutes after Yom Kippur. How do you view yourself? And this is, by the way, another, I don't know if we are saying that here next week or not, But this is another interesting discussion of Yom Kippur. This entire idea of tshuva is, Rav Soloveitchik has an interesting piece. By the way, if you didn't learn and read again and again Ala Tshuva of Rav Soloveitchik, you are really missing an incredible understanding of tshuva. You don't need to agree to everything he says, but there are tremendous lessons there. He has one parak about bi'ur ara or a'alato, which means to destroy evil or to elevate it. What's the purpose of tshuva? To destroy my evil instincts, so I don't have any temptations and any inclinations to do evil, or to recognize the evil inclination and to elevate it to be a helper for doing good things. We say in Shema, b'chol levavcha, u'b'chol nafshecha, u'b'chol modecha, right? What is b'chol levavcha? Two. What, you have two hearts? No, you have only one. Yetzer tov ve'yetzer hara. How can you serve God with yetzer hara? There are. You can learn many things about yourself from your yetzer hara. If we will run to mitzvot, like sometimes we run to do averot, we'll be in pretty good shape. And I'm not talking about the running, I'm talking about the idea of the excitement. The idea is that you can learn from the yetzer hara. How do you do that? That's obviously more complicated. To have the yetzer hara in, it's easier to get it out, and then you are quote unquote all good. So tshuva brings some interesting psychological, also sometimes even theological questions, that it all basically derives from these discussions in the Gemara. So Bezrat Hashem next week we'll continue.